You know, Lieutenant Governor Ramsey is a friend of Beacon and a frequent critic of government waste, so it was sort of surprising that he came out with $500,000 for the museum in Bristol. And I think the most egregious part of it is it's not even in Tennessee, and this shows that taxpayer waste doesn't even stop at the state line.
Republicans had an opportunity to say, we've
Right.
identified pork, and they decided not to cut it. Do you think that's like Republicans not talk, they're talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk?
Well, I'll say a few things. Number one, Republicans spend just like Democrats, and so when you're in control, you're going to spend money, and there's an incentive there to spend taxpayers' money on things that really don't benefit taxpayers as a whole, that go to benefit a select few. And that's problematic, and that's why we do the pork report. I will say that there were some significant tax cuts. We were involved in repealing the death tax and the gift tax, and there's a rollback on the food tax, so that will essentially limit them from spending that money in the future, which is a very good thing, but they're still going to figure out ways to spend money on wasteful things, and we'll continue to call them out, whether it's Republicans or Democrats doing it.
Do you think that's something that voters should be holding sitting Republicans accountable for?
I think so. You hold all politicians accountable, whether they're state Republicans or local elected officials, and it's important from a transparency aspect for us to call that out. Again, we work very closely with members of the legislature, and they've done a lot of good things, but when they step out of line, it's incumbent upon us, groups like the Beacon Center, to call them out and let taxpayers know how they're spending their money.
I do believe that for a small investment of $500,000 that we're putting in a $13 million project in the state of Tennessee, that in the end will more than get our money back in sales tax revenues and tourism in the state of Tennessee. And it became a football for two reasons. Number one, it was mine, and they wanted to take a little jab at me, and I understand that. That's no problem. And obviously the other side is it is just barely across the state line in Virginia where the building was donated, even though the Alliance itself is chartered in Tennessee, and Bristol, Tennessee and Virginia recognized the birthplace of country music. So it became a political football, and I'll have to hand it to them. That was pretty good. It caught me off guard. I'll be right up front with you. That when they came up with this, somebody over the weekend must have found that somewhere. And I talked to one of you all standing out in the hall, was it Tom, about that, was perfectly honest about this, and they saw that article and said, you know, we're talking about a $31 billion budget, and they zeroed in on this much of it, but it was one that sounded awful.
On the Country Music Museum, I mean, you're right, it's only $500,000, but is that something you feel like the taxpayers should pay for, as opposed to plenty of country music folks who probably have money that they would like to invest in something like that?
On a museum that preserves the heritage of not only the state of Tennessee but Bristol, yes. I'm a huge believer in preserving history, preserving our roots, and I think that fits right into my basic philosophy in general.